Welcome back to Brampton Focus All Candidates Debate 2015. My name is Michael A. Charbon. Thanks for joining us. We're going to continue our questioning now. Let's go to Badar, please, if you don't mind, and your next question.
Thank you, Michael. So, being the incoming chair for our Municipal Chamber Brampton Board of Trade, I would be remiss if I don't talk about small to medium-sized businesses. Somebody here on the panel alluded the fact that 77% of all private sector jobs in Canada between the years 2002 and 12 were a result of small to medium-sized business activity. Starting with the Liberal Party, how is your party proposing to help sustain and help small to medium-sized businesses?
So right from the beginning, thank you for your question. We're going to reduce the small business tax rate from 11 to 9% to ensure that small businesses have the economic resources to hire more people, because at the end of the day, they're the backbone of the Canadian economy, and that's what drives future investment in our cities, and it ensures that how Canada grows. Canada grows through small businesses, and the Liberal Party's always been a good friend of small businesses, and we will continue to do so going forward. But it's not just in reducing their tax rates. It goes back to the historical infrastructure spending. How are we going to grow the economy overall? It's not just good enough to cut their rates. We got to ensure that there's a climate for each small business owner to succeed. So what are we going to do? We're going to ensure that we invest in transit. We ensure that we invest in affordable housing. We ensure that we invest in youth unemployment to ensure, youth jobs to ensure that they have an opportunity to join these small businesses. One thing in particular, the initiative, for 25,000 co-op positions across Canada, the Liberal Party will pick up the first $5,000 bill to ensure that small businesses go out and hire our students, will stimulate the economy across the board.
Thank you, sir. Rebuttal from the NDP, Morton Singh.
It's interesting. If we speak about voting records, I can tell you that the New Democratic Party has a long-standing commitment to this reduction in the small business tax from 11% to 9%. Not only are we running on it now in 2015, but I can share with you that when Jack Layton was our leader in 2011, we ran on the exact same thing. We introduced this particular policy in the House of Commons in late 2014, and the Liberals, in fact, voted against it. So I'm glad to see that they're recent converts to our particular plan. How, unfortunately, it's disingenuous for them to say that, they're truly committed. In addition to that, actions speak louder than the words. Provincially in Manitoba, an NDP government has reduced small business tax rate to 0%.
Thank you. And final rebuttal by Mr. Saul Butcher, Green Party.
Okay, one of the issues that comes in between small business versus big business is that big business has access to a lot of lobbying power because they have a lot of finances and they're very connected. So a lot of times when laws are made at the federal level, big business has a lot of influence over how those laws are made, getting exemptions for certain things they'd like exemptions for, and so forth. And it's very hard for small business to get considered at the federal level. Often what they have to do is band together in small business federations or associations. One of the things the Green Party is going to do is we're bringing forward a bill that will require that all future legislation consider the impact on small business and incorporate that into the discussion of the bill so that it's not dependent on lobbying. It's not leaving it to lobbying to make sure that small business is accounted for in legislation.
Thank you, Mr. Butcher. I encourage our parties. There's a couple of folks who have not spoken up to this point, so allow everybody a chance because they have people who want to hear what they have to say as well. Okay, I'll give our next question to Ms. Sophia Brown-Ramsey, please.
Thank you so much. So I think we've touched on this a little bit already, but I kind of want to push it a lot more. In my work on a regular basis, I'm in the community a lot, and I see a lot of parents, single mothers, who have a lot of issues around childcare. So I want to go back there. And so we know we don't have a national childcare system here in Canada. But what we're hearing is that Canadians seem to want to have the federal government to adopt this. What is your party going to do to make sure that this happens? Let's go with the Green Party first. And that's speaking, and I say this respectfully, I really would love to see you take it down to the Brampton level even. Like, if we can bring it home to where we are right now too, I'd really appreciate that.
Pauline Thornham.
What the Green Party is proposing is GLI, Guaranteed Livable Income, which would streamline and simplify all of the laws that we have, or the gifts that we give to people to keep them welfare, etc. It would be a guaranteed livable income, which would bring it to a $15 an hour basic wage, and that way people are allowed free to pay for childcare. They're able, so it would happen in Brampton. It would happen everywhere. I mean, I understand that it's.
And how do you propose to pay for that?
Well, one of the ways is the raising the taxes to corporations, which used to be at 28%. They're down to 15%, and we're, as in the government, we would be pushing the government to bring the tax up to 19%, which would give a whole lot of extra cash to these programs.
Thank you.
Okay.
Go ahead, but MDT, Rosemary Keane.
I'm glad you raised that, Sophia. So this is one of the key policies of the NDP. Affordable childcare, no more than $15 a day for parents. The reason this is so important in Brampton is we have an average age of mid-30s in Brampton. We have 40 to 45% of our neighborhoods are low income or very low income. We have many parents where one parent must stay home because they cannot afford the cost of childcare. If we have a national childcare strategy and we increase the childcare spaces by 1 million across the country, then we allow both parents to get out and earn a decent wage.
Thank you, Ms. Keane. I'm going to go to Ruby Sahota from the Liberals. Final rebuttal on this question.
Yes, we are the only party that is planning on changing this child benefit that's received by families. We're going to cut it for those that are millionaires, and we're going to bring the focus back on the families that need it the most. So the middle class, the lower income families, on average through our plan, they will see about $2,500 more a year. Some families up to $6,000, $7,000 to $10,000 a year in this plan. They can pay for childcare. It'll lift 315,000 children out of poverty. Through our infrastructure plan, we will also prioritize childcare spaces that are so desperately needed in Brampton, but the families can choose what they require. Under the NDP plan, it's quite the mirage. They're saying that we're going to have $15 a daycare. However, that's not going to happen for another 8 years.
Thank you, Ms. Sahota. And I'm going to go to Spider Jones, please, for our next question.
As I related to earlier, I've spent many years working with young people, and we have a youth center, an empowerment center up in the Jane Finch area. We're into our 4th year, and so I deal with a lot of young people, and at one particular time I was appointed the one and the only in the history of this province, of this nation, the ambassador to skilled trades. We have not recovered yet, I believe, from the Mike Harris common sense revolution when he closed down many shops in the schools. With us losing so many jobs, the skilled trades is an area that I would like to see our parties zero in on, because skilled trade people make good money in so many different levels. My son's a mechanic, and I have a lot of young people that want to learn the skilled trades. There's a great shortage here, but we're not doing very much in that area. I want to address this to the NDP party, first of all. What do you see happening in that area so we can bring skilled trades here and emphasize it?
Adoma Patterson from the NDP.
Yes. Thank you, Mr. Jones. I think that's a key question. Thank you, Spider. I think it's an important question because, as mentioned previously, the unemployment rate in Peel region for young people is 19%. And so it means there's a disconnect there. The NDP's plan to support 40,000 young people to get into training, access proper training that leads them to jobs that are not precarious, is a key piece. The other thing, of course, through our infrastructure investments, those create jobs. They create local jobs, and they come with training and apprenticeship opportunities, so that we're connecting not only the young people who graduate from post-secondary and are struggling to find employment, but also those young people who may not have completed, who need an alternate path to university or college. So the capital investments through transit and infrastructure will create those jobs and allow for the training opportunities that young people in our community need.
Thank you, Adoma. I'll go to the Green Party. Karthinta Gobinha, please.
As you've mentioned, you did some work in the Jane and Finch community. I actually grew up in the Malvern community, and growing up in a low-income household, it was very difficult for me to find employment. And after graduating without the actual skills, it was very difficult to integrate into the workforce. And it's more of who you know than what you know. The system is already corrupted for people to get into the system itself. So education was a big thing for us. We couldn't afford education. My parents couldn't afford it. I had to take student loans. We proposed a national youth initiative strategy and an apprenticeship program that focuses on these initial programs, such as carpenting, mechanic, and plumbing programs that are very, very good jobs and land these jobs far more quickly than the other programs that are offered to students.
Thank you, Kathinka. I'd like to go now to Mr. Rick Drennan. And Rick, not to the PCs this time, please.
Are there any more empty tables out there? First of all, I'd like to commend the Brampton Focus for the format tonight. I think it's working well. Instead of so one person answering the question from the party, it keeps people from jumping all over each other, which we saw in the debates last night. Anyway, what I'd like to talk about is that Canada for years has relied on natural resources. If it was running along the ground, we'd kill it, or if it was in the ground, we'd drill for it. The oil patch, especially the oil sands, is an environmental disaster and a black eye for Canada around the world. Yet natural resources help drive our economy, and basically our economy is based on that. How does your party square economic growth with good stewardship of the land? And I'll ask the Green Party this one.
Thank you for the question. It's a great one. And first, we must be quite clear in our understanding that while the economy and the environment are intrinsically linked, one doesn't have to come at the expense of the other. So the question is, how do we do that? And the answer is quite simple. We invest in lucrative, clean, green industries and technology. We don't have to destroy our habitat for financial gain. The Green Party plan will grow the economy by taking aggressive action to confront the climate crisis. This is something that's urgent. It's not a left-wing issue. It's not a right-wing issue. This is a human issue, and this has effect outside of Canada as well, and it's vital that we do something about it, and the Green Party will. We have a deadline for a new environmental treaty this December, and we'll act fast to reduce greenhouse gases. We'll invest in municipalities such as Brampton. We'll reduce waste by improving energy productivity and jumping onto the clean energy revolution. And we'll be incentivizing these green initiatives. So if you ask, how are businesses going to get on board this? Well, there's going to be money involved, so they'll be interested in getting on board this. Because as we've seen in the last several years, people don't want to do anything unless there's some sort of financial gain. So part of our plan is to reduce carbon emissions and get us out of this recession. It's been shown that cap and trade is open to fraud, so that doesn't work too well, but we've seen that in BC, the carbon tax does work.
All right, thank you. The next question is an internet question. I'm going to pose this to all three of the parties. We've heard that both the Liberals, NDP, and the Green Party have all said that they will support the CBC. As a television producer and as someone who is in the media, the CBC is very important for us as a nation, not only as a community, but as a nation, to be able to make sure that we can protect our identity, that we can produce, that we can employ, and we can create things that are Canadian by us and for us. Our neighbor to the south has great influence on us, both from movies and television. The CBC is a very important aspect of our culture. Some would say that it's a very expensive aspect of our culture. So we have to weigh that question. I'd like each of you to comment on where is your position with the CBC, budget-wise, and what your feeling is as the importance of the CBC to us as a country. And if I may, I'd like to start with the Liberals, please.
Thank you for your question. Let me unequivocally say that the Liberal Party will reverse the $170 million cuts that the Conservative Party has done to the CBC over the last 10 years. We cannot emphasize enough that CBC and Canadian broadcasting is important to our cultural identity. It is who we are. We are Canadian, and we're proud to be Canadian. And I would call upon all parties, actually, that this isn't a political issue. It's not a Conservative issue or an NDP issue or a Green Party issue or a Liberal Party issue. It is a Canadian issue, and the CBC is important for all Canadians. We all remember growing up watching Hockey Night in Canada, and I think that's a part of who we are, and it's important to ensure that we have that funding to encourage independent media, and the Liberal Party stands steadfast with the CBC.
Thank you, Mr. Grehal. I'll go to the Green Party next.
Outside of the obvious entertainment aspect that the CBC brings to our lives, they've got incredible programming across the spectrum. They're not just a TV station. They've got several radio stations. They air different kinds of music. They are champions of the arts. And I think what we've seen over the last decade is we've seen a lot of anti-arts sentiment from the current government. So they're shutting down things that they apparently don't feel is important. But arts is part of who we are as people, as creative individuals, and as people who consume the art. And that's highly important to me as an artist as well. So,
if I could just interject, there is one objective where people say that because we are spending so much money at the CBC, should it not sustain itself? Are we artificially pumping it up with things that maybe people aren't watching? There is a conflict there for some people who say that because we as a public are putting money into it, that maybe it should be forced to survive on its own, while others believe that we should be funding it because it's part of who we are. There is that conflict.
There obviously is that conflict, but it comes from a place of not really knowing all the facts. We only fund half of the CBC. The rest of it is funded by ad revenue, and we can encourage the CBC to continue going down that route and invoke or solicit more advertisement money, rather. One of the great things about the CBC, though, is that they can't really be bought. Like, they tell it how it is, whether it's something that's against the Conservatives, the NDP, the Liberals, or the Green Party. They're an important voice, and without it, this country is going to be headed into a very dark place, and I'd rather not go down that route.
Sean Hatton, thank you. And finally, from the NDP, Amarjeet Singh.
Thanks for that question. Being in the media for almost 2 decades myself in here at Toronto, I believe CBC has to be saved. It's not only in the cities, but also it serves all over the country. There's a part of country where only CBC delivers the information our Canadians needed. Liberal Party is talking to saving CBC, but when they were in the government, they had deeper cut in the CBC funding. NDP is there to protect CBC, not only giving them $115 million extra, and also guarantee stable funding so CBC can stay strong and independent. And there's another reason one more thing we particularly need to do is end political interference in board appointments. Let them do the business. If they can run independent, I believe CBC won't need any more fundings in the future, but let the government stay out of CBC business and they will do well. NDP believes, and that's what I believe.
Thank you very much, Amarjeet Singh. You're watching the 2015 Brampton Focus debate. We'll be back with lots more right after this.